Hello, my name is Charlene DeChico. It is with sincere passion that I am eager to learn about people, culture, true history, and the overall human experience. Join with me as I embark on this journey. This is your Community Spotlight. November is Native American Heritage Month, and here on Community Spotlight, we'd like to share with you some really interesting stories, segments, and spotlights on some of our very own Native Americans. So we hope you enjoy this broadcast, and thank you for watching and supporting our program.
Jeed, my name is Justin Deegan. I grew up in Parshall, North Dakota. My family's from Parshall. My dad's from White Shoal. My mom was partially raised in Mandaree, North Dakota. And I am a citizen of the three affiliated tribes, Mandan, Hidatsa, Rickera Nation. I am also a Rickera, and I'm also Oglala and Hunkpapa. And the Hunkpapa side comes from my dad, part of the Fort Capel Standing Buffalo community up in Canada. And then on my mother's side, I'm Oglala from Pine Ridge. Her family comes from Kyle, South Dakota. And it's really quite miraculous how I came into existence, just because the major historical disagreements between the Rickeras and the Lakotas and Dakotas and Nakotas. And so, yeah, I feel blessed to be here because I know the insurmountable odds that it took to get us into where we're at historically, currently. I think the journey to become a filmmaker really kind of resulted out of necessity, because I started out as an actor. I'm a theater actor, and I caught the acting bug when we performed One Flew the Cuckoo's Nest. I played the part of Chief Bromden. The director that I was working with from Fargo, his name was Larry Schwartz. He would send me casting calls for auditions. Finally, one day he called me up and we were talking on the phone, catching up, and he said, why aren't you going to those auditions? And I said, well, I'm a theater actor. I'm not a movie actor. And he said to me, well, that's not an excuse. He said, because acting for film is a lot easier than acting for stage. Because acting for stage, you have to be on 100% of the time. You can't make any mistakes, and you have to be in that moment. I got a part in my first read for a short film. I won't say the name of it because the film is loaded with poverty porn, and so at that particular time in that era, those are the only movies and roles available for Native people. Were to be represented in poverty porn, like alcoholism and drug abuse and being poor and poverty stricken, just all those things, that those negative tropes that you think about when you see films and representation of Native people. At that moment, I got a part. I was excited. I went back home in Long Island, and then what ended up happening was they made the film without me, and so that was the moment I realized, I was upset, but at the same time I realized if I want to be in films, I should make my own movies. And so I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to create something. So I went out and got some books written about Native, or not Native, but just, filmmakers that did it on their own. And so I'm a huge fan of Robert Rodriguez. He made a film called El Mariachi. And then that film was widely acclaimed internationally. And it was something that he did on his own. And he sold his body to science to finance that film. Like, it was shot on 16 millimeter film, like real film. This is before the days of digital, And so that inspiration, I would listen to and watch the commentaries in all of these films from independent filmmakers. And of course, everybody knows that he became a famous filmmaker, but he became really good friends with Quentin Tarantino, who was also a self-made filmmaker. He went to film school in the video stores, the old video stores. And I started looking up and researching other people who did the same thing. And I thought, well, if they can do it, I can probably do it now, because it's easier because everything's digital now. So, and I thought, well, what is it that I'm going to do to create my first film? And I decided to make a film about my experience in New York City on my way to my audition. And And I thought, because what was happening when I went to my audition is I saw all these street performers in New York, playing drums or playing on buckets, playing saxophones, guitars, just busking for cash, extra dollars. And I thought to myself, man, it's crazy because like all these kids have come from different boroughs of New York. They probably took the subway to get to Times Square just so they could jam. And I thought I would love to see natives in Times Square with hand drums just jamming. And so I thought, how can I make that happen? And I decided that I would be the vehicle to go through these neighborhoods in interacting with native street performers. And that became my film. And the end of the film, I meet these hand drummers in Times Square, and they jam right down there in Times Square. And I was lucky enough to get a group of singers from Mystic Lake or Mystic River, the Mystic River Singers. The film that we were working on, the very first one, was called Concrete 49. And 49 being the premise of the old days, after powwows, everybody would go out to some desolate area, bring out their hand drums and sing songs, round dance songs all night. So this film culminates at the end of the film where there's not a huge, but a group of hand drummers singing in downtown New York City in the heart at Times Square, having a jam session. If you're gonna make your first film, my biggest suggestion, if you're gonna skimp on price, skimp on getting a camera operator, skimp on directors, producers, where you don't want to skimp is your audio. Make sure you go and get yourself and hire a really good audio engineer that you can afford. And then, because that's what makes your film. When I teach film to native kids, I always tell them there's 3 core principles to making film. You light it, you mic it, and then you shoot it. When you light it, the light doesn't have to always be there, right? Because it can be underexposed or overexposed, but that's okay. Or the framing's weird or whatever. And then when you shoot it, it could be some odd angle or whatever. That doesn't really matter. And the reason being is because when you are mic'd properly, the mic will make up for poor lighting. The mic will make up for poor shooting, for poorly made movies. If you look at films like the Blair Witch Project, that's a prime example. The reason why that movie works so well is because the audio, it's so clean, it's amazing. It makes up for those inadequacies in those other areas. Sound makes a movie. And when you have good sound, nothing else really matters. And that's a big important part of the filmmaking process. But that was my journey and how I became a filmmaker and the reason why. And I still haven't returned to acting. Wow. So the film last year that went to LA Skins Fest in Los Angeles was called the Survival Camp, the Arikara Survival Camp, and that was hosted by Whirlwind Bull and his wife Aggie, and their work with young kids to raise awareness about getting off your devices and just feeling the ground and just immersing yourself in nature. And there's a lot more to it. They explain it way better than I did. But it's just really a really great, heartfelt story about these young kids that come together every year at this particular time, and that's what made its premiere in LA, and Whirlwind and Aggie both came out for that, and it was a lot of fun. They had a blast, and then what's great about it is the fact that it features both young men and young women. And it's sort of like this coming of age experience for these young people. And it really kind of brings together a community of new blood into this atmosphere of the way that we grew up, here on Fort Berthold or MHA Nation, living off the land and fishing and just hunting and things that we took as normal back then, but now it's something that's sort of taken for granted because not many people get to do it anymore. So, and hunting season's coming up right around the corner here, and that's always a fun, cherished time for for family members to get together and go out and spend time together and harvest their catch for the winter and pass the meat out to the relatives, you know. So I think that's what the story's about. And then the other thing that is premiering on November 23rd at the Chinese Theater, TCL, in Hollywood, is my latest film called Datnanoku. Datnanoku just means I'm singing, but so there's basically two versions of Arikara. There's like the new version that's out now that everybody's speaking, which is great, it's awesome. And then there's the other version which is a little bit older from my grandmother's generation. And the way they pronounce it is differently too. So the original pronunciation is Datnanoku. But now it's easier to speak, so it says Datnanoku, and it just means I'm singing. But the real hidden meaning behind it, because like a lot of times in our indigenous languages, there are actual additive meanings behind things. And Datnanoku, what it really means is we're going to make a way. And when they were about to sing, that was what they did, is that we're going to make a way so that they would perform these songs for ceremony purposes, because that was what that's what called the ancestors. That's what established the prayer within the medicine lodge. And so that's what the film is about. Datnanoku is about standing in the face of adversity, because the backdrop of the film is the Garrison Dam. And as a lot of us know, and so many of us have experienced through our relatives, there's a very few people that still are here that were part of that generation before the flood came, before they dammed up the river. But the Missouri River was an important part of our way of life. It was an important part of our spiritual practices and our culture. Back in those days, everybody was together, was in the community. Everybody was just a short ways from each other. And what ended up happening with the dam is it pushed everybody up onto higher ground, separating the communities. That's when our farming practices as an agrarian society, agrarian as agricultural society, as people who grew and cultivated corn and crops and beans and squash and watermelons and things that they used to subsist themselves off the land, was taken away because of the dam. And everybody lost their property, their real estate, pushed up onto higher ground. And so the land was harder because it was no longer as fertile as it was closer to the riverbanks. And so that's when the banks, this is where predatory lending started. The banks started giving monies to people as loans to start farming practices, businesses. But then the system was sort of skewed, so they weren't able to really sell their crops. And so what ended up happening is the banks foreclosed on the property. And that's why there's so much fee land on tribal properties today, because of those practices, to intentionally get people to foreclose on their land and lose their properties. And so that's how everybody started buying up all these parcels of land all across the reservation. And then, of course, there's the encroachment and everything else from the coal industry. We went from 12 million acres down to 1 million acres, just under 1 million acres, and that's due a large part to coal. And then the oil and gas further west from here as well. So those encroachment practices. So this film is really a small look into how all of that practice started and how it created this disharmony among our three Field tribes. I remember hearing stories by my grandparents. They would talk and say that everybody was close. Everybody was more assisting to each other and more welcoming. But once that everybody was separated, that's when divisions started happening. That's when name calling and labeling started happening. And everybody said, well, go back across the river, you're not welcome over here, the unwanted ones and all that other stuff. And that's just all part of that division, you know. And so it is what it is now, you know. And so a lot of us are that have become aware of the historical context and the ties to everything. We see how, you know, a lot of that has affected our people. And so what we're doing is we're going back to an old ceremony in this film. We don't actually film the ceremony, but we approach it right before it happens. And so you see this ceremony where, you know, my grandmother, Fanny Whiteman, and Edith Perkins, and the whole old crew, and Lily Brave, and all these really amazing people that I had the pleasure of knowing and get to know and spend time with my grandparents. It's just a lot of historical richness and cultural richness and a lot of really fond and appreciative memories of those times. And so in this film we approach the river, and this one it's even though the line was severed by the federal government through the Pick-Sloan Act, and also because of the dam that was created through executive order, we go back to the river in this film and we reapproach it. But the thing about my film is I see a lot of things in my dreams, and so I stuck a lot of stuff in my dreams in this film. So you see the Milky Way, and what we call Awakusu is the universe, and then we see the Northern Lights in there, but then we also do something kind of different, and we see it everywhere, in the daytime, at night obviously, and then it's in the water. And that's because of what I see in my dreams, and I stick a lot of things in there. And so like I pay respect and homage to the Medicine Lodge as well. So that's all symbolically represented in this film, with earth, wind, fire, and water, the four key elements, and then the final part of that fifth element being consciousness. And consciousness is connected through Tataranoku, that prayer making a way. The takeaway for this film is really reconnecting to our spiritual practices and reconnecting our consciousness as a collective among the three Freeley tribes, specifically Arikara, because the film is really directed and aimed at Arikara people, specifically because of our Arikara genesis, where we started and how we've come into this region, and to find the answers, to have the questions to find the answers, because the consciousness is the thing that connects all of us, and that's the thing that drives us to where we actually find the answers. And so that's what the film is about, is waking up the subconscious mind to connect all of those dots. There's some really cool dreams that I've had in the past, and then that's what really basically drove me to create this project. And I always tell my kids and my relatives to pay attention, because a lot of times we don't have a lot of people to speak to nowadays because of, you know, loss and separation and all that other stuff. But the reality is, I always tell my kids to pay attention, because the universe answers back. And so that, in that essence, that's what I'm trying to tell our kids, our younger ones, because when we pay attention, that's when we receive our answers. And the really cool thing about this project is, right before it became a reality, to get the funding for it, it was this group called the Reciprocity Project, led by our leader, Tracy Rector, who's a filmmaker from the Pacific Northwest. She's Coastal Salish, and she's just a phenomenal powerhouse, man. She's brought together so many indigenous filmmakers and creatives from around the world. And I'm a part of season 2 of Reciprocity Project, and a big part of our support has been the Upstander Project, based out of Boston and the East Coast. And they've really done a lot to champion indigenous filmmakers from around the world. And I'm lucky enough to be one of the recipients of the Upstander label to be a part of the Upstander Reciprocity Project fellowship cohort status. And so it wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for Tracy to reach out and say, hey, we want to know if you'd be interested in doing this, but we wanted to make it about the environment. And so I thought, wow, this is a really great opportunity to seize in order to, tell the story about the dam. And the film draws a correlation between the Garrison Dam of the old generation and our generation now, which is the oil and gas generation, and how a lot of the changes have been historic, from the physical change of the dam and what it did, and then the cultural change that it created. And then on top of that, the oil and gas, and how my generation remembers what the land used to be look like before it's turned into this, late night, roaring flare situation and the smells, and it's different. It's so much different than it used to be. So it's what the film is about. But it doesn't say stop, it doesn't throw anything at your face. It just makes you look at it and make a decision for yourself of how you should feel about it or how to feel about it. I don't want to forget, because she's a key part of this whole process with this film, and a lot of the knowledge that I have is because of her, and it's my mom. Mm-hmm. My mom, Darlene Perkins, she is the central figure of this film, and it follows her work using her fashion, Red Lightning Couture, to bring awareness to issues. And she's brought awareness to diabetes and breast cancer, and now the new thing is her partnership with these climate change organizations from around the world. And the latest one being the work she did with Boston Green Fest out in Boston, Massachusetts, with a lot of the local environmental people who really bring awareness to what's happening regarding climate change. And we're feeling the effects now. It's right here. It's right in our face, and people are more and more people are taking notice. What's really interesting is the fact that a couple years ago I was walking through the Senex here in town, actually in Garrison, and these farmers were talking about climate change and how was it affecting the crops. And that was something I never thought I'd ever hear. And so everybody's taking notice of it. Well, like the women say nawa, like I'm finished or I'm done, and the men say awa. But a lot of us we just say way to go state. It's like saying thank you, kind of parting way in a good way. Thank you.
The land was really fertile where I grew up. And the water was so clean. To us, the Missouri River is our grandmother. And then we were disconnected. Our way of life was outlawed. But it finally came to me. I am seeking to reconnect to our grandmother.
November is Native American Heritage Month, and here on Community Spotlight, we'd like to share with you some really interesting stories, segments, and spotlights on some of our very own Native Americans. So we hope you enjoy this broadcast, and thank you for watching and supporting our program.
I remember standing in the middle of a field, calling the police department, asking them to please call me back. I want to report my sister missing, but I didn't get a call back.
When my mom asked me to start looking for her, that's when it really hit me. I'm like, oh my God, she really is missing.
When I first met Heather, I asked her, what can I do to help?
All right, 1, 2, 3.
The Medicine Wheel ride started back in 2019. Women were sharing stories about domestic violence. One of the writers, her daughter was murdered. It was just like one after another saying, what can we do on this epidemic, of MMIW?
That ache inside of your chest never goes away. The love you have for them never dissipates.
We believe in a cause, and that's what our patch on the back of our jacket represents. We represent sisterhood.
This Rough Rider rodeo that we're at today, the Berger family, Shad in particular, is the organizer, but this whole history of this area involves our nation. Mandan itself is named after one of our tribes, the Mandan Nidautanarikara. And so our history is very rich here. All the parks that we have here, all the monuments that we have are all symbolic of how we lived here for thousands of years. And so when we were approached to say, how would you like to put together a show, a rodeo or so, in which we feature some of the cultural aspects and history, we said, yeah, of course we'll do that. So we became a major sponsor of this particular event. It's important when people come here to watch this rodeo that they understand the meaning of the history and people that were here before and they're still here today. With your dancers, their history, the singing, the teepees and things of that nature. And these are celebrations that go on all warm summer long, right? And so we start in May and we end up this last week in the United Tribes, where we have thousands of dancers and singers and tens of thousands of people, 100,000 people that come into the city to enjoy the culture. And it's kind of like the grand event of all the summer dancing in Powwow. We work a lot with our youth. We sponsor training, rodeos, all for our youth, because long ago, our MHA people were top competitors in the world out in NFR long ago in the 50s and the 60s. MHA riders and the Hall of Fame on a national and state level were there. Now we've gotten a position that we can help promote the sport again. You see a lot of our young athletes or young adult athletes starting to rise up to go back to compete at that level, on the world level. So we're going to be so excited in the years to come here, in the next decade. All the riders are going to come out of this area and perform at that kind of level, and who knows, be world champions like we've had in the past.
Anyone can choose to make a difference. You can help people succeed, rebuild after disasters, protect the environment, or feed the hungry. Not only will you make a difference for others, but for yourself. You can earn money for college, learn career skills, and make friendships that last a lifetime. Make a difference. Choose your future. Choose AmeriCorps.
I was 26 years old. I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot of a movie theater getting high.
I was an outcast my whole life, I didn't know where I belonged.
Knocking my head against the wall over and over and over again.
So I came to Narcotics Anonymous. I heard a message that made my ears pop.
People who I can relate to and identify with. Managed to heal relationships, start families, and be happy with life.
Drug problem? We can help. We've been there. Narcotics Anonymous.